Kim, and I'm 45 years old, and I was born in South Korea, in Seoul. My parents separated when I was young, and I was staying with my maternal, side of the family. Grandparents really played their part in really helping me to navigate through that sort of single motherness. I was born prematurely, so I was born, I think, 7 months, and the doctor basically said the kid might end up being, could actually become a little disabled. So they actually recommended my parents to terminate. My grandmother, she was the one who looked at me and said, oh, she has long fingers, long, toes, and she has longevity. And she basically said, do not do anything as such. I'll take care of the child if you need help. So my 할머니, my grandma, she basically took on that role of mother. Everything that I remember about my childhood was really about interacting with 할아버지, 할머니, and obviously busy mom, obviously working. And I don't know, to me I felt sort of adequately supported when I was a child. I sort of consider my mom as more like a sister figure. And at the time, I think my uncle used to sort of travel quite a bit. So he would bring some exotic stuff from Hong Kong or from Europe or, some other places. And, obviously these little gadgets were kind of very popular among the kids. That sort of led us into migrating to Australia, where my uncle. So I was 11 when I migrated to Australia. And yeah, at the time, that was 1987. We didn't even have a direct flight from Seoul to Sydney. So we had to fly through Narita Airport. The most challenging part of it all was that the fact that I couldn't speak English, and at first I couldn't understand the teachers. Back then I was a 5th grader, but you don't learn English back in Korea. Nowadays, I think even the kindergarten preschoolers learn English. So I only knew how to say hello, and my name is Bomin Kim, and it was just basically a whole, I guess, culture shock of, a lot of things. You don't pack rice for lunch, you pack sandwiches, or you buy from the canteen. I did thrive academically, so I was one of those brightest kids in the class, and obviously that made my family quite proud. Only time that was fun was that math time was actually the most exciting part, because I was actually able to understand, right? I was able to solve these problems kind of thing. So that other than that, it was kind of tough. But then again, I don't know. I think I managed to get through, made friends. Obviously, there are a lot of other migrant friends. This reminds me, there was actually a boy in the class, Korean boy, who actually spoke good English. So he must have born in Australia. And he used to be extremely embarrassed about my existence. And, so I think at one point, I wanted to go to the bathroom, and then I asked the teacher. I think somehow she understood, and she wanted this boy to take me, and he was so upset and didn't really want to, he was scowling and just oh, yeah. And I felt that, I felt so, awful about it. The fact that another human being is sort of not so kind to me and sort of treating me as if I'm, as if I'm a, nothing kind of thing. So that was actually sort of something that I always remember. The funny thing is, I met him at university, and we remembered, hey, did we go to the same primary school, elementary school? And he's like, oh yeah, I remember you. And I said, did you know that I still remember the time when you were, right? And then he's like, yes, I do. You know what? I felt bad about it. So we actually had a really good laugh about that kind of experience. And yeah, it was kind of fun. I never thought I would leave Australia, because I was basically, working after I graduated university. I was doing some work here and then I joined a US company to work there, and the expectations from your family and your mom was to get married and move out. So funny thing is, I stayed and lived with my parents in a place until I moved to the US, which I think I was 35, which is incredible in American standards, because you typically move out when you're 18. In other words, I was not able to sort of see anything beyond, oh yeah, I'm just going to get married and see how it goes, kind of thing. It was like, oh yeah, I'm still going to be in Sydney, going to be, hopefully, marry a nice guy, just, keep working at the company as a nice, model minority type of Asian person, and just be successful and be content with my life. And that was sort of it. Around when I was sort of late 20s, I sort of realized that, hang on, I need to see the world. And that's when I sort of said, hey, I'm going to go and do some traveling. And my mom obviously didn't really like that idea. She's like, you can do all that when you get married. I'm like, no. So went to Europe, try to save up money. And then as part of like business trips, went to India, went to the Ganges River, and like try to just go into the water and just experience. And the other, nice travel was going to Tibet. So I went all by myself, getting on the train from Beijing, riding the 3-day train to Lhasa. So all these experiences kind of made me feel like, oh, wow, I'm actually really missing out. It wasn't until 2012 when somebody basically said, hey, would you like to come to the headquarters and work for the a global role rather than doing Asia Pacific role? So that's when I'm like, oh, hang on a minute, the United States, interesting. So my grandma was, as I mentioned, like mother to me, and she was one of those old harmonies, right, moms of the older generation, who was selfless, kind, and just nice to everybody. And she'd always say, be nice to other people, be good to other people, give things, to other people. If somebody's, trying to be, be their way, just give them the chance to be, right? And just step aside, kind of thing. So a little too much in a way, because obviously you don't want to be pushover in your life. But she was, in a way, pushover, but because of the genuine sympathy and sort of, kind of towards other people's needs, if you will. She never really spent time to take care of her own self, but she was the caregiver for everybody, including me. And I always felt indebted about that. I don't know, that sort of kind of made me feel like, yes, maybe these are the important things that I need to have in my life to be a better person, that is just beyond, having a lot of means and be able to like spend and sort of, be materialistic. It's actually better to have these genuine heart in yourself. And I'm a Christian too. And she prayed every day and said, pray for the family and pray for the humanity. Despite I, obviously had a childhood where, obviously I didn't have a father, and obviously there was a lot of pressure or sort of burden on a little child who had to sort of help out in the family. I don't know, that sort of foundational groundedness kind of helped me sort of take in the positive, side of life, learning this goodness and be able to sort of express that for my child as she grows up is, something that I really cherish as part of my experience. She passed away in 2016. She had dementia and Alzheimer's. So she was in the nursing home because it kind of got to a point where we were not able to take care of her. So she was nice. I used to visit every Sunday, make, some little food that she likes, bring some nice, sweets. And she, we used to have a good time. And, she would never remember my name, but if I say, hey, Harmony, Bominia, and she'd go, oh, Bominia, and she'd be very happy. She would smile and interact. And after a while, she would not remember your name. But I could feel that she knows me. And she was comfortable with me sort of hanging out. So that was sort of the most heartbreaking part of making that decision to move. And obviously she passed away as I was in New York. That was probably the saddest moment of my life when she passed away. When I came to the US 10 years ago, obviously I thought I had this, I don't know, like a sort of a illusion, if you will, that America was a superior country where things are all, advanced. And at the time, Obama was in presidency. So I'm like, wow, a black person being the president, wow, this is incredible, right? So I didn't really think too much about politics or anything like that. Living in San Francisco, you see a lot of, African Americans who were homeless. And, think people were having difficult times, and I went volunteering in Oakland, area, East San Francisco, and then there were a lot of disadvantaged, displaced African American people, and I was sort of shocked to a point where, wow, there is discrimination, there is societal disparity, like absolute disparity that you don't necessarily see as a foreigner. I always grew up as a model minority, and I was always told, hey, even if you're called names, right, you just ignore them. Oh, they're just, a bunch of, bullies. You just do what you do well. And if you do well enough, people will recognize you. What I've actually learned through this sort of experience in the recent times is that I will not let that happen anymore. So I will be voicing out if I see any injustice about these, racial discriminations, whether it's just for Asians or if it's Black African American people, right? I just feel like have this strong conviction about, hey, I got to do something about it, and making sure that we get to a point where we are really recognizing each other as respectable human beings. That is my sort of number one mission, to make sure that I raise a child that is decent and that is a global citizen who recognizes these issues and be able to navigate through this complexity, which is probably going to get even more complex as she grows up. My name is Bomin Kim, and this is my Korean, Australian, and American story.